Hello, my friend. Today I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins in the twilight of the First Age, when the world still echoed with the songs of its birth, and the mountains remembered the touch of stars. There came a stillness before the storm. It was a silence that draped itself over Beleriand like a shroud of mist, trembling with the weight of things unseen. The rivers murmured low in their beds, the trees stood hushed and waiting, and even the winds that danced over the hills carried a strange and solemn whisper, a name long unspoken in Valinor. He who was once the mightiest of the Ainur had fallen into shadow long ago. His heart turned to fire and iron, his desire bent only on dominion and ruin. From his black fortress of Angband, Morgoth had poured forth hatred like smoke from a forge, darkening the hearts of elves and men, sundering kingdoms, and tearing love from the hands of those who dared to dream. But there are tides in the long story of Arda, and even the slow-moving will of the Valar stirs when the world cries long enough. It was in these days, when hope seemed but a ghost drifting over the fields of loss, that the Valar rose at last from their silence. In the golden halls of Aman, Manwë, High King of Arda, looked to the east, his eyes clouded with grief and fire, and with him stood Eönwë, his herald, whose voice had once commanded the stars. And so the message was given: Morgoth must fall, and all the might of the West would be turned to that end. But this story, dear listener, is not just one of gods and demons. It is also the tale of Elenion, an elf lord of the Noldor, who bore a quiet heart and a blade of light. He had not seen Aman since the days before the exile, when the trees still shone upon the land and the air smelled of untouched dawn. He had wandered through grief and war, across the ruins of Doriath and the ashes of Gondolin. And though his sword had tasted many a battle, he had grown weary, not from fear, but from the burden of memory. Elenion lived now in the hidden valley of Cirith Aelin, a place untouched by war, where the stars still danced in quiet pools and the birds sang without dread. But he dreamed nightly of a silver city crumbling into the sea, of children lost in smoke, and of a shadow that wore the sky like a crown. He would wake with the whisper of a name on his lips, Ariel, his beloved, taken long ago by the flames of Angband. One evening, as the first notes of twilight spread across the valley, Elenion walked alone beneath the willow trees. The light spilled golden through the leaves, and the air was heavy with the scent of earth and rain. He felt a stirring beneath his feet, as though the very ground was drawing breath, and the wind carried to him a voice not heard in an age. "Come forth, flame-bearer," it said. "The hour is upon us." And so he turned, and saw before him a figure robed in silver and crowned in starlight. Eönwë, herald of the Valar. His presence was not loud, not thunderous, but deep and resonant like the echo of a forgotten bell. The very trees bent their branches as he passed, and even the light seemed to move slower around him. "You are called," Eönwë said, "not by kings nor council, but by the will of Arda itself. The war of wrath is begun, and the Valar summon those of heart unbroken." Elenion's hands trembled. He looked to the east where the lands of shadow lay hidden beyond hills and time. "I have no strength left for wrath," he whispered. "Only sorrow remains to me." Eönwë's gaze did not falter. "Then come with your sorrow, for sorrow forged into action is a sword none may turn aside." The stars rose higher, one by one, silent witnesses to fate. And Elenion, though the ache in his heart was a wound that would not close, bowed his head and took up his blade once more. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but for memory. That night, a host unlike any seen since the world was young gathered upon the western shores. Elves of Aman, bright as flame, men of forgotten valor, the Maiar in radiant form cloaked in light. And at the head of them all stood Eönwë, bearing a banner woven from the sky itself, its stars trembling with a will beyond words. As Elenion approached, he saw among them faces from the elder days, warriors once lost, now called back for this final reckoning. Yet even in that sea of might, there was a hush, for all knew this would not be a battle of armies alone. This would be the unmaking of a god. And so they set sail from the undying lands, crossing the great sea beneath a sky heavy with omens. The stars watched, the waves whispered, and the silence between them was filled with the weight of ages. In the distance, across the dark water, Beleriand waited, and so too did Morgoth. The voyage across the sundering seas was not swift, nor was it gentle. The host of the West sailed in vessels not made by mortal hands, ships carved from starlight and moonwood, their sails spun of wind and memory, of the breath of the trees before they withered. The waters that bore them were deep and knowing, moving with a patience older than speech. Beneath their keels, the ocean murmured ancient songs, and at night it gleamed with the glow of submerged constellations, lost stars that had fallen into the sea and chosen never to rise again. Elenion stood often at the prow of his ship, wrapped not in armor, but in a cloak woven of twilight threads, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon that was at once both a promise and a sentence. He did not speak much during those first days of the crossing, for his heart was occupied with reflection, as if every wave that broke against the hull peeled away another layer of himself. Memories surfaced, not in clarity, but as impressions etched in aching color. The silver light in Ariel's eyes before she vanished into flame, the sound of children laughing in Gondolin's courtyards before the towers crumbled, the scent of white lilies blooming beside a stream now lost beneath ash and stone. One evening, as the air turned cool and the stars emerged like tears in the sky, Eönwë came to him, his robes untouched by the wind, his presence like the pause between two great notes of a symphony. He did not speak at first. Instead, he stood beside Elenion in silence, allowing the breath of the world to speak for them both. It was only after the moon had risen fully, bathing the sea in silver sorrow, that Eönwë's voice broke the stillness, as soft as a lullaby spoken at the end of time. "You are troubled, Elenion, not with fear of battle that I can see, but with the question that lies beneath all others. Why fight at all when the world seems already broken?" Elenion did not answer immediately. He felt the wind lift his hair, cool against his brow, as though the sea itself sought to soothe his thoughts. He closed his eyes and let the silence stretch. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of long years, the weariness of one who had buried hope again and again and found the soil growing hard. "I fear," he said, and the word did not shame him. Not the blade, nor the fire, nor even the fall of mountains. I fear what comes after. For even if we succeed, if Morgoth is cast down, if the sky is cleared and the earth made whole, what then? Shall we sing songs of glory while the bones of the lost lie unmarked beneath the sea? Shall we build new towers atop old graves and call that peace? He turned to Eönwë, and his eyes, though weary, burned with a quiet, steady flame. My heart is a book of ruins, each page inked with a name I could not save. I do not fight for victory. I fight because if I do not, then their memories will vanish with me, and the silence will be all that remains. Eönwë's expression did not change, yet there was a deepening in his gaze, like a well drawing upon deeper waters. There is wisdom in sorrow, he said, though sorrow itself is a poor teacher. You are not alone in your doubts. Even among the Ainur we question. But do you not see that silence you fear? That void where memory dies? It is not conquered by might, but by witness. You carry their names. You remember their laughter. In you they live still. And so long as you stand, blade drawn not in rage but in remembrance, you become more than a warrior. You become a vessel for the light that Morgoth could never touch. The sea swelled around them, waves rising and falling with solemn grace, as if the waters themselves bowed in respect to those who spoke with such reverence. Far off, thunder rumbled, not from storm, but from the shifting bones of the world, stirred by the coming of wrath. Elenion sighed, and with it some small burden seemed to lift. He looked once more toward the eastern horizon, where the veil of mist grew thinner each day. Then let me be a vessel, he said, almost to himself. Let my sorrow be shaped into light. Let my blade speak the names of the dead, and let this war be the song they never had the chance to sing. The days grew shorter as they sailed farther east, and the sea darkened beneath their hulls. No longer did the waters reflect starlight so readily. They had become heavier, tinged with shadow, as if sensing the nearness of a poisoned shore. Faint shapes could now be seen in the distance, jagged cliffs that clawed at the sky, black clouds that roiled like thoughts unspoken. The coast of Beleriand, once a land of music and forests, now lay half-submerged, shattered by time and torment. When at last they reached the shore, the very earth seemed to groan beneath their feet. The sky was bruised, the land scarred. Trees stood like ghosts, their branches twisted in agony, their roots sunk deep into cursed soil. And upon that broken land the host of the Valar made ready. Eönwë's banner was raised, and its light pierced the clouds, casting long shadows that shivered and fled. Armies assembled, not with the clamor of conquest, but with the stillness of fate made manifest. There were elves of Valinor whose eyes had never known grief until now. There were men whose blood carried the echo of the stars, and there were spirits of fire and song clad in mortal guise, their presence too vast to look upon for long. But among them all, Elenion moved as a quiet flame. He did not shout, nor did he boast. Yet wherever he passed, others stood straighter, as though the sorrow he bore reminded them of what they stood to protect. On the eve of battle, he stood upon a ridge overlooking the plain where the first assault would fall. The wind tugged at his cloak, and the air smelled of iron and ash. He knelt and placed his hand upon the earth, feeling its pulse, slow, pained, but not yet stilled. "You remember," he whispered to the land itself. "You remember laughter, don't you? You remember love. Let that memory shield you, for tomorrow the wrath of the West shall come." And far below, beneath stone and fire, Morgoth stirred. The morning did not rise so much as drift into being, like the slow unfolding of an old memory. A veil of gray light spilling across the land, not warm, not bright, but heavy with portent, as though the sun itself hesitated at the edge of the world, unsure whether to lend its gaze to what was to come. The wind that crept across the plains of Anfoglath carried no birdsong, no laughter, no scent of blossom or green, only the dry, brittle breath of the wasted north, touched faintly by ash and rust, by the long sigh of a world that had endured too many laments. Elenion stood in stillness, his armor silent, unmarred, catching what little light there was in a dull gleam like moonlight on river stones. His hand resting lightly upon the hilt of his blade, as if even the act of gripping it too tightly would confirm the path he had not yet fully embraced. Around him the host of the West stirred, not with the thunderous chaos of lesser armies, but with a slow, resonant gravity, as though the land itself was preparing to speak through them, to pour its memory, its pain, its yearning for cleansing into the vessel of war. He did not move, not at first. He only breathed slowly, deliberately, and listened. Not to the murmurs of the soldiers, not to the creaking of leather and metal, but to the deeper music beneath all things. There was always a song, he had once told Ariel long ago, when the world was still full of color and hope, when stars had seemed close enough to touch. "There is a song," he had said to her as they lay in the grasses of Nevrast, the sky above them thick with fireflies, woven into the bones of the earth. A sorrowful tune, yes, but not without beauty. And I think it waits for someone to answer it. He had not known then that she would be taken, nor that his own voice would one day be shaped by the same grief that haunted the land. "Elenion," came a voice, low and soft, but threaded with iron. It was Calimion, his sworn companion, who had followed him through the burning of Dorthonion and the fall of Nargothrond, who had walked beside him when even the stars had seemed to fade. His hair, once dark as the raven's wing, was now streaked with silver, not from age, but from the touch of fear and shadow too often faced. "You do not speak. Is the silence your prayer or your burden?" Elenion turned slowly, and when he met his friend's gaze, there was a weight behind his eyes. Not despair, but something older, like the knowledge etched into the bark of trees that have weathered 1,000 storms. "Both," he replied after a long pause, his voice quiet but unwavering. "There are things that cannot be spoken without cheapening them, and things that, when spoken, become real in ways we may not be ready for. This silence, it is where I carry the names of the dead." Calimion's brow furrowed, and for a time he said nothing. Then, slowly, he sat beside Elenion, the cold earth pressing into his knees like the hand of memory itself. "Sometimes I wonder," he said, "if we were made to bear this much memory. We carry names as though they are lanterns, but the weight of them is like iron. We fight so that others may forget what we remember, and yet I do not know if I wish to forget. I fear what I would become without my grief." Elenion nodded, and a faint breeze lifted a lock of hair from his brow, touching his skin with a chill of something ancient and unseen. "Grief is the price of having loved something the world could not keep," he said, his voice distant, like a dream remembered at the edge of waking. "And if we lose even that, we become hollow, empty blades wielded by the wind." The sky above them began to change, subtly at first, as if a great eye was opening beyond the clouds. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the wind that came down from the north no longer whispered, it moaned. A sound like metal dragged across stone, like the breath of something too vast, too old, and too full of hate to name. The very earth trembled, and a thin crack split the frozen soil beneath their feet, as if the land itself recoiled in dread. A horn sounded, low and long, not harsh, but deep and sorrowful, like the bell of a sunken city tolling from beneath the waves. It came from the rear of the host, yet it echoed through the bones of all who heard it, and even the trees, those few twisted remnants that had somehow survived the long rot of Morgoth's dominion, seemed to flinch, their limbs clawing at the air as though begging to be unburdened. Eönwë stepped forward then, and though he said no word, his banner rose into the wind, and its light cut through the thickening gloom, like the first word of creation uttered again after an age of silence. The ground before them, barren, broken, littered with the ghosts of old battles, shuddered. And far in the distance, beneath the shadow of Thangorodrim's blackened peaks, a darkness moved. Not a cloud, not a shadow of passing storm, but a tide of fire and iron, of creatures malformed by hatred and bent by the will of Morgoth, pouring forth from the gates of Angband with a sound like the breaking of worlds. Elenion rose, drawing his sword with the quiet reverence of a priest unveiling a relic, and for a moment he simply stood, the blade reflecting the banner's light, his eyes fixed on the oncoming ruin. His lips moved, not in a war cry, but an invocation. "Ariel," he whispered, "may your memory be my armor, and your laughter the wind that guides my hand." And the earth, though wounded, seemed to stir at his words. And then, as if some ancient breath long held beneath the weight of ages had been loosed, the war of wrath began. Not with a sudden thunderclap or the clash of metal upon metal, but with the slow, inevitable rising of a tide too vast to be turned, too ancient to be reasoned with, too laden with memory to be stopped. It was as though the world itself, sickened by centuries of silence, had finally begun to scream, not with words, but with storms of flame and light, with the groaning of mountains and the wailing of stone. And in that moment, the earth opened like a wound not fully healed, pouring forth its fury in rivers of smoke and sorrow, in howls that made the wind flinch and the sky tremble. The host of the West moved as a single breath held in the chest of creation, their banners whipping in winds that did not obey the patterns of sky or sea, but moved according to the tremors in the soul of the world. As Elenion ran with the vanguard, his feet barely touching the cracked and ruined ground, he felt not rage, not bloodlust, but a kind of sacred grief that thrummed in the very marrow of his bones, as if every step he took across that desecrated land was a prayer, not for vengeance, but for remembrance. And beneath the sound of blades being drawn and the stamping of hooves and boots, there was that deeper song again, that undercurrent of mourning and memory, as if the earth itself sang through them, urging them not to destroy, but to redeem. At first it was the lesser things that met them. Wargs and trolls, orcs twisted beyond recognition by the ancient malice of their maker. They came howling across the plain, eyes glinting with the kind of hunger that is born not from need, but from a deeper emptiness, from the knowledge that they were made not to live, but to consume and be consumed. But these creatures, for all their terror, were like sparks flung from a burning branch compared to what loomed behind them. For even as Elenion's blade struck true, singing through the neck of a charging beast, and sending it crashing into the dust with a final cry that echoed like the breaking of glass, he could feel it, a deeper presence, a pressure on the soul, like a great thought half-formed and poisonous, looming behind the eyes of the world. The sky dimmed then, not with the coming of night, but with the rising of smoke and shadow. Tendrils of darkness that reached down from Thangorodrim's peaks like fingers of a god who had forgotten how to create and remembered only how to unmake. The light of Eönwë's banner flared defiantly, casting arcs of brilliance across the battlefield. But the shadow pressed ever closer, thickening the air until it clung to the lungs like grief, until it filled the mouth like ash. And Elenion, though he stood tall among his kin, felt for the first time not fear, but a kind of hollowing, a sense that he was no longer wholly himself, that the land was speaking through him now, that the voice in his heart was no longer his alone. It was then that the Balrogs came. They emerged not as mere warriors of fire and whip, but as living regrets cast in flame, as memories given terrible form. Their shapes flickered and twisted with every step, and though they bore the likeness of beasts, it was their eyes that truly wounded. Eyes that burned not with hatred, but with the agony of having once been something else, something better, something sacred. Elenion faltered as one approached, its presence bending the air around it, its steps searing the very earth into blackened glass. He saw in that moment not a monster, but a fallen star, a broken piece of heaven that wept fire instead of tears. "Do you see it?" Calimion cried beside him, his voice barely carrying over the roar of battle. "They are not creatures of darkness alone. They are what we could become if memory were stripped away, if light itself were chained and twisted and taught only to burn." Elenion's throat tightened, and his blade, though still steady in his hand, now felt heavier, as though burdened not only with the weight of steel, but with the weight of history. "Then we must be their answer," he murmured, "not their mirror." And with that he surged forward, his feet finding rhythm with the heartbeat of the land. His strikes guided not by anger, but by sorrow, by the aching need to speak in the only language the broken could still understand. Resistance, remembrance, redemption. He met the Balrog's lash with a cry not of fury, but of longing, a cry that called not for blood, but for healing, even in the act of battle. The flames licked at his armor, peeling away its shine, searing through the edges of his cloak. But still he pressed forward, blade dancing like a whisper between the spaces where fire turned to silence. He did not win, not truly. The Balrog fell, yes. its body shattered, its flame dispersed into the sky like a dying breath. But Elenion was not untouched. His spirit felt scorched, as if he had looked too closely into the heart of uncreation and seen himself reflected there, thin and flickering, barely held together by will alone. He fell to one knee, gasping, and the earth beneath him felt warm, not with heat, but with mourning. The wind shifted, and in the distance, beyond the smoke and ruin, there rose a cry, not from the mouths of men or elves, not from the hosts of the west or the foul legions of the north, but from the mountain itself. Thangorodrim groaned, a sound like the breaking of time, the shattering of silence. And then, through the gloom, through the boiling black clouds, something vast and terrible stirred. Wings that blotted out stars, scales black as despair, eyes like twin eclipses, devouring all light. The sky darkened not in mere hue, but in essence, as though some ancient covenant between light and time had been broken, and the heavens themselves recoiled from what now rose to challenge all that still remembered the beauty of stars. Ancalagon the Black, first of the winged dragons, mightiest of all the fell beasts bred in the furnaces of Morgoth's hate, unfurled his wings with a sound like the collapse of mountains, like the closing of a great door upon hope. His coming was not simply seen, but felt, as though the world had drawn in a single terrified breath, and now dared not exhale. He rose from the broken peaks of Thangorodrim like a shadow given breath, like the final thought of a dying god. And with each beat of his monstrous wings, the clouds turned red with fire, and the air grew heavy with despair. Elenion stood transfixed, his blade still dripping with the remnants of flame, the echo of the slain Balrogs still pulsing through his limbs like a storm's aftershock. He looked upward, not as a warrior gauges an enemy, but as a child watches a nightmare cross into waking, powerless to blink it away. The dragon's body moved like a continent uprooted, each scale a mountain of obsidian, each claw long enough to pierce cities. And his breath, his breath was not mere fire, but a sorrow so ancient, so complete, it seared the spirit as much as flesh. When Ancalagon roared, it was not a battle cry. It was a lament, a sound too vast for language, a chorus of all things that had ever fallen into shadow, a dirge for lost light. Beside Elenion, Calimion had fallen to one knee, not from injury, but from the sheer weight of dread. His face was pale beneath the grime and smoke, and his voice trembled when he spoke. There are things in this world that should never have been shaped. Things that lie outside the balance, that bear no echo of Eru's song. That is one of them. Elenion did not reply immediately, for his thoughts moved slowly, as if slogging through a mire of grief. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, not with fear, but with awe, touched by sorrow, as if he were witnessing the death of a star. And yet it was shaped, not by chance, not by need, but by will, a will that sought not creation, but dominion. Morgoth did not build this creature to live, only to conquer, to smother the sky itself. Ancalagon is not a being. He is an idea made flesh. The idea that strength is the only truth, that fear is the purest bond. Calimion turned his gaze upward, his eyes narrowing against the heat and smoke. "How do you fight an idea?" he asked, not in challenge, but in weary philosophy, as though asking the night itself for counsel. "How do you strike against something so vast, so rooted in the bones of the world, that even time bows before it?" Elenion let out a slow breath, the air catching in his lungs like the whisper of dying leaves. "You don't destroy it," he said at last. "Not completely. But you stand before it, even so. You meet its fire with memory, its claws with the names of those you've lost. You let it know that you remember what it seeks to erase. That is the defiance it cannot understand." And even as they spoke, Ancalagon descended, vast wings sweeping across the plains of Anfauglith like veils of unmaking. He did not fly as a bird does, nor even as a beast. He moved as if the sky had been broken, as if gravity had bent itself in service to his will. Lightning split the clouds above him, not with light, but with veins of darkness, and the wind that trailed in his wake tore trees from the earth and sent whole swaths of the battlefield spinning into chaos. The host of the West rallied, not with panic, but with grim resolve. Eönwë raised his hand, and from it leapt a beam of light so pure, so fierce, it carved a path through the smoke like the memory of dawn. Around him the Maiar unfurled their true forms, beings of light and music and purpose, their voices rising in countersong to the dragon's scream, a harmony woven not of domination, but of healing, of remembrance, of all the quiet acts of beauty the world had ever dared to whisper. But even that light trembled in the shadow of Ancalagon, for he was not merely a beast of fire. He was the crown of Morgoth's vengeance, a weapon forged not of steel or spell, but of unrelenting will. As he soared over the battlefield, his breath scorched legions, his wings scattered the lines, and his roar turned courage to silence. Elenion saw warriors he had known for centuries, stalwart captains of the Noldor, hunters of the woods of Osiriand, singers of lost Doriath, cast to the wind like petals in a storm. And yet none fled, none turned away. It was not courage alone that held them, nor duty, nor even the hope of victory. It was memory, the deep, aching truth that if they did not stand here now, beneath the shadow of what should not be, then all that had been good, all that had been sung or made or loved, would be unremembered. And so Elenion, though the skin of his face blistered in the heat, though his knees shook and the smoke clawed at his lungs like a living thing, lifted his sword once more and stepped into the wind. The ground quaked beneath him, and fire rained from the sky. But the stars above did not blink away. They held, faint and distant but unwavering, like the eyes of the forgotten watching from the edges of time. And Elenion, though he knew he was no match for what loomed above, whispered to those stars. "For you," he said, "who lit the path when the sun was lost. For you who sang in the dark. For you who dared to love in a world such as this. I will not kneel." And the wind, though wild and full of ruin, seemed for a moment to hesitate, as though it too remembered. Nightfall did not come gently. It descended not as a curtain drawn with grace, but as a tidal surge of shadow swallowing what light remained in the sky until even the stars themselves seemed to shrink from the darkness that now reigned. The clouds, no longer mere mist, but molten seams of thunder and fury, churned with a lightless fire, as if the heavens themselves had grown angry and old, weighed down by the burden of too much grief, too many unwept sorrows. The land, ever a mirror to the soul, responded in kind. The fields of Anfauglith, once wind-swept plains where the grass had once whispered in golden tongues, now lay trampled and blackened. The soil broken open like an old wound, spilling not blood, but the silence of things that had forgotten how to grow. The host of the West had scattered, not into disarray, but into a solemn defiance. Formations reknit themselves like the weaving of threads pulled taut across a loom of fire. From the ridges of the north came the cries of the Vanyar, voices like starlight cast into sound, singing not of war, but of remembrance, of the light that even Morgoth could not fully unmake. From the east, the banners of men rose, torn and scorched but unbowed, their captains bearing torches against the gloom, not to see, for their eyes had grown accustomed to the dark, but to proclaim that they would not be unseen. And in the center, beneath the trembling shadow of Ancalagon's wings, stood Elenion, his blade still lit by the fading echo of Eönwë's flame, his heart a quiet ember wrapped in the long cloth of memory. He stood atop a ridge of broken stone, a ruin, perhaps once a watchtower or a burial mound, but now stripped of name and history, reclaimed by fire and time. And as he looked upon the battlefield, where dragons writhed like living avalanches and Balrogs surged in silence, where light and shadow met not in chaos, but in a terrible holy order, he spoke aloud, not to Calimion, who knelt nearby, tending to a wound that bled both blood and thought, but to the air itself, to the space between things, where words find their truest shape. "This is not a battle," he said softly, his voice barely louder than the wind, which now moved as if through the lungs of the dying. "It is a reckoning." Calimion looked up, the edges of his face lit by the glow of distant fire. He said nothing, but his eyes asked the question his voice could not. Elenion turned to him slowly, his gaze as distant as the stars, though his feet remained fixed to the broken stone. "We speak of good and evil as if they were banners easily carried," he said, "as if the world were a board, and we the pieces upon it. But look around you, my brother, not at the fire, not at the ruin, but at what still remains. There in the arms of the fallen elf who yet shields the body of a child, there in the torn cloak a soldier wraps around a friend, dying too slowly to scream. There is no banner for that, no glory, only truth. That to love in a world bent on unmaking itself is the rarest courage." Calimion's breath caught. "And is that enough?" he asked. "To stand here, blade in hand, heart full of names and dreams, while the sky cracks open and a dragon dark as time itself blots out all light. Is that truly enough?" Elenion did not answer at once, for the question deserved more than words. It deserved silence first, and thought. He walked a few paces to the edge of the ridge, where the wind rose stronger now, thick with a scent of scorched iron and torn earth, and there he knelt, placing his hand upon the stone. The rock was warm, not from the heat of flame, but from memory. He felt it pulse faintly beneath his fingers, as if it remembered too. the weight of the tower it once bore, the echo of song, the tread of feet that believed in things long forgotten. He closed his eyes and let that memory wash through him, not as a vision, but as a knowing. "It must be," he said at last, rising to his full height, "because if it is not, if love and memory and the quiet strength to endure are not enough, then we are already lost, and all that follows is but the falling of ashes." Calimion, though tears welled in his eyes, nodded slowly. "Then let us burn brightly," he whispered, "for as long as we are able." And from the heart of the storm the dragon came again. Ancalagon swept low, his wings beating a rhythm older than speech, older than the hills, his breath scouring the ridge with a fire so hot it turned air to liquid. Yet Elenion did not flee. He stood, blade raised, not as a warrior, but as a flame refusing to be quenched, as the last note of a song defying silence. And from behind him voices rose, not in command, not in order, but in harmony. They sang, low at first, broken, uncertain, but true. A song in Quenya, old as the stars, telling not of war, but of a tree beneath which lovers once met. Of a harp that played itself when the moon was full. Of a child who once, long ago, laughed beneath the sun. It was not a song to defeat a dragon, but it was not meant to be. It was meant to remember. And in that remembering, the wind turned just slightly. The clouds thinned just faintly. And the stars, distant though they were, watched. There is a moment suspended between the fury of a storm and its inevitable collapse. When time seems to hesitate, when the sky, heavy with the weight of too much sound and too little silence, trembles upon the edge of becoming something else. That was the moment in which Elenion now stood, blade lifted not as a challenge, but as an offering, a gesture less of war than of testimony, as though to say, I have seen beauty even here, and though it burns, I will not let it be forgotten. Asterisk. Ancalagon the Black, ancient and immense, circled once above the battlefield, his vast wings stirring gales that bent trees like grass and sent whole regiments stumbling like petals torn from a dying bloom. The heat of his presence warped the very light, curling the edges of perception like paper near flame, and the sky above him grew darker still, not with the absence of sun, but with the imposition of a force so absolute, so rooted in the desire to silence rather than to speak, that it seemed to pull the world inward toward itself, collapsing meaning into void. But below him the song had not ceased. The voices of the host rose now, not in unison, but in communion, a harmony not imposed but found, each note a choice, each word a defiance. And their melody, delicate as the fall of leaves, yet stubborn as the roots that grip beneath stone, reached into the storm and held it, not with strength, not with power, but with the quiet authority of memory. They sang not of victories, but of gardens left untended, of rivers that once ran clear and full beneath the moon, of hands held in the last light of a sunset that would never return. And in the singing there was grief, yes, but also a kind of joy that grief cannot erase, a joy born not of circumstance, but of truth, that life had once been and might still be again. Elenion stood at the heart of it all, not as a commander nor a hero, but as a single voice made flesh. And as Ancalagon descended, the force of his coming drawing the very air into a vortex of heat and shadow, Elenion turned inward, not to escape, but to remember. He remembered Ariel, her eyes like the light of Telperion reflected in a bowl of still water, her laughter echoing through the marble halls of Vinyamar, her touch like a promise spoken too softly to last. He remembered the moment she died, not with clarity, but with weight, a memory that had no shape, but whose presence had shaped everything. And he spoke aloud, though the wind stole most of his words. "I never believed that death was the end," he murmured, his voice raw with the tenderness of wounds that never healed. "But I feared so often, so deeply, that memory might be, that the forgetting would be the greater loss, that the world would go on but leave behind what mattered." The wind seemed to pause just briefly, as if even it was listening. "So I stand," he said, louder now, steadier. "Not to win, not to survive, but to remember aloud, to give form to what was lost, to say with every breath that we were here, that we loved, that we tried." And as Ancalagon struck, his wings folding into a dive so fast and brutal it tore the clouds into spirals and sent fire hurtling down like the tears of a wrathful god, the world seemed to break. The mountain crumbled first. Thangorodrim, which had stood since the days of the great lamps, shuddered like a colossus whose spine had cracked. Stones split with a groan that echoed across the sea, and the sky above it filled with dust and flame. The dragon, vast beyond reckoning, collided not with a man, nor a blade, nor even with a spell, but with the will of the world itself, the defiance of stars that had watched since the beginning, the breath of the earth that refused to forget, the song of a people who refused to die quietly. Then, far above, the host rose in a pillar of light, and his hand reached not for a sword, but for truth. He did not strike Ancalagon down. He unveiled him. The light he summoned was not blinding, not burning. It was clarity made visible, the light of remembrance, the illumination of what lies beneath all hatred. And in that moment Ancalagon's flame flickered, not extinguished, but revealed. And in that moment, those who looked closely saw not only a beast of ruin, but a soul long ago broken, long ago twisted. A Maya taken and reforged until it remembered nothing but pain. And then he fell. The dragon's body struck the mountains like a second sundering. The peaks shattered beneath him, and the fires that rose were not wrathful, but cleansing, as though the land itself wept, and in weeping began to heal. Silence followed. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of something completed. A breath finally released. Elenion sank to his knees, his blade falling beside him with a dull thud, its light dim not from defeat, but from rest. Calimion came to him, his face streaked with ash and tears, and blood that was not all his own. He did not speak, not yet. He only placed a hand on Elenion's shoulder, grounding him as if to say, "You are still here, and that is enough." Asterisk. And slowly, slowly the stars returned, not all at once, and not in brilliance, but as pinpricks of silver in a sky still heavy with smoke. And they did not shine with triumph, but with witness. And from the lips of one soldier, then another, the song resumed, quieter now, but still true. Dawn broke not in triumph, but in quiet wonder, as though the sun itself had approached the edge of the world with reverence, peering gently over the horizon, as one might lift the veil from a sleeping face, afraid not to wake, but to disturb something sacred. The light that came was not golden, not radiant, but soft, an amber hush that spilled across the broken plains of Beleriand like balm upon a wound too long left untended. Smoke still rose in curling fingers from the sundered peaks where Ancalagon had fallen, and the winds that swept across the battlefield were cooler now, tinged not with the scent of ash and blood, but with the barest trace of salt and green, of a sea that dreamed still, and of distant forests remembering the song of leaves. Elenion awoke with the earth beneath his cheek and the taste of stone and sorrow on his tongue. The echoes of his last waking thoughts still warm in the hollow of his mind, like embers cradled in a hearth not yet gone cold. He did not rise at once. Instead, he breathed slowly and let the dawn pass over him as if he were no longer a warrior, but a part of the land itself, another broken remnant rooted and waiting for the sky to remember his name. Around him others stirred, some walking like ghosts, their movements light and unfocused, as if unsure whether they had returned to the waking world or still wandered through the last passages of dream. Others wept without voice, their tears carving clean lines through ash-darkened faces, and a few stood silently, their swords sheathed, not in victory, but in stillness. It was Calimion who came to him once more, his steps slower now, as though the night had laid upon his shoulders a weight not of armor or exhaustion, but of accumulated years, a deep, invisible sediment of memory and mourning that time would never wholly lift. He did not speak at first. He only knelt, his fingers tracing the line of a cracked root that curled up from the broken stone, marveling softly at how, even here, life sought a way to whisper its insistence. Elenion turned his face slightly, his voice rough as gravel smoothed by rain. "Is it over?" he asked. Not as one seeks information, but as one who hopes for permission to release a breath he has held too long. Calimion nodded, his eyes never leaving the earth. "The mountain has fallen. The dragon lies still. Eönwë walks among the wounded, and even the Maiar have quieted. Morgoth has not yet been seen, but his power has broken. Or perhaps it has retreated, like frost that hides in the cracks until summer's full song." Elenion was silent for a long while, the wind brushing past him like a familiar voice just out of reach. And when he spoke again, it was with a kind of wonder, fragile and sharp as a child's first question. "Then, what are we now that wrath is finished?" Calimion's brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in the effort of unfolding the layers of thought his friend's question had awakened. He drew his knees up and rested his chin upon them, his voice low and deliberate, like a story told beside a long burning fire. "That is the question, isn't it? We were blades in the hand of justice. We were memory sharpened into defiance. We bore names like shields and grief like fire. But now the battle is quiet, and the world does not know what to call us." Elenion nodded, closing his eyes against the first rays of sunlight that dared now to touch the horizon. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "if we have become too shaped by loss to recognize peace? If we have clung so tightly to the names of the dead that we no longer know how to speak the names of the living?" Calimion looked at him then, and in his eyes there was no answer, only understanding. "Yes," he said, "I wonder it every time I look at the stars and see not beauty, but the echo of those who no longer stand beneath them." They sat there in silence. Two warriors who were no longer called to war. Two voices who had once shouted into the wind and now barely dared to whisper, as if fearing the wind might no longer answer. Around them the battlefield had changed, not erased, not healed, but softened. The fires had died down, the ground no longer quaked with fury, and the air, though heavy with the aftertaste of ruin, now moved with a gentleness that spoke of the world's first uncertain steps toward healing. The bodies of the fallen had not yet been gathered, but already flowers had begun to bloom, tiny, fragile things pushing through cracks in the stone, bright with colors that seemed too innocent for a place such as this. Elenion saw one, pale blue, trembling in the breeze, and reached out a hand toward it, not to pluck, but to feel. His fingers hovered just above its petals, and for a moment he imagined that the flower knew him, remembered him as the land did, recognized him not as a destroyer, but as one who had tried, however imperfectly, to protect what was small and good. "I dreamed last night," Elenion said after a while, his voice softer than the breath of a breeze across a lake. "Not of Ariel, not of battle. I dreamed of a child standing in a field of barley, laughing as the wind passed through her hair. She was not anyone I knew. She may not even have been real. But she laughed, and I think that may be the most sacred sound I've ever heard." Calimion smiled, a slow, tired smile, as though even the act of joy had become a kind of labor, but a worthy one. "Then perhaps," he said, "we are not so broken. Not if we can still dream of laughter." Elenion looked to the east, where the sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows that no longer seemed ominous, but holy. "The world is not healed," he said, "but it remembers how." And in the distance, where the ruins of Angband smoldered beneath the fallen weight of Thangorodrim's bones, the wind changed. It no longer smelled of sulfur and steel. It carried the faint scent of salt and pine, and something older still, something that felt like the breath of the sea when the stars are clear, something that felt like home. And so the earth at last began to settle, not with a great sweeping of wings or a chorus of celestial music, but with the slow exhalation of a world that had held its breath for far too long. In their absence, the sky returned. Not in their absence, the sky returned. Not entirely blue, not yet, but hued with the tentative silver of healing, a softness that seemed to ask for permission before casting light upon a land not yet ready to be beautiful again. The wind no longer screamed or burned. It wandered, aimless, thoughtful, bearing the scent of damp soil and distant seas, of things buried but not gone, things broken but still breathing. The plain of Anfauglith, long scarred by the tread of dark hosts and the fire of dragon flight, bore the signs of something almost sacramental. Scorched ridges now held pools of still water where once there was only dust. And these new lakes reflected the skies above with such clarity that it seemed the stars themselves had come down to rest within the wounds of the world. Trees, shattered and stripped bare, had not yet died, and their roots stretched cautiously beneath the blackened crust of the earth, seeking memory in the soil, whispering songs only the deep places could hear. And among them walked the victors, if such a word could still be used, slowly, reverently, as if treading through a dream that had not yet decided whether to end in hope or sorrow. Elenion walked without armor now. He had set it aside, not in triumph, but as one lays down a book at the end of a long reading, when the tale has moved from fire to silence, when the hands no longer need the weight of steel to remember their purpose. He wore a simple tunic marked still with soot and blood, and in his hand he carried not a blade, but a staff of driftwood found by the shore, smoothed by time and tide, a thing that had once been lost and now was held with care. His eyes, though ringed by weariness, had softened, not in defeat, but in the quiet that comes after understanding. For though the war was ended, the grief remained. And grief, he had learned, was not a wound to be healed, but a presence to be honored, a companion that would walk with him into whatever came next. By his side walked Calimion, and they spoke little at first, for silence had become a language between them more intimate than speech. But as they crested a low hill where the grass had begun impossibly to green again, Elenion paused, and his gaze turned not to the horizon, but to the hollow between two stones where a single flower had bloomed. It was white, not pure like snow, but shaded with the softest blue at its edges, like the wing of a dove seen in twilight. "It is strange," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "how the smallest things carry the weight of everything. That flower will not be named in the songs. No tale will be told of its blooming. And yet I look at it and feel not joy, perhaps, but something adjacent, something truer, as if it knows more of healing than I ever could." Calimion sat beside him, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, his eyes scanning the horizon where the mountains of the west shimmered faintly like memories made manifest. "Perhaps," he said, "it is because the flower asks nothing of us. It demands no oaths, no glory. It simply lives, and in living, it forgives the world." Elenion smiled faintly, the gesture not wide, but deep. "Do you think the world forgives us?" Calimion took a long breath before answering, as if the question required him to feel the answer in his bones before daring to speak it aloud. "I think," he said, "that the world remembers, and remembrance is the first form of forgiveness. It does not forget the wounds we gave it, but it allows us still to walk upon it, to see beauty rise from the ashes we left behind. Perhaps that is the world's way of telling us, you are not cast out, you are not finished. There is more to be done." Elenion looked to the west then, to where the sea glittered like a mirror fractured into 1,000 pieces of light, and he thought of Valinor, not as a place, but as an idea, a longing folded into the soul like a song whose chorus one has forgotten but still hums, hoping the notes will return. Eönwë had summoned many to return, to board the ships and pass into peace, into the lands where sorrow did not walk, where the light was never tired, never dimmed. But Elenion knew in that stillness that his place was here. Not because he feared peace, nor because he loved the pain of memory, but because he felt in the trembling earth beneath his feet and in the breath of the flower between the stones that this wounded world had need of those who remembered both the fire and the garden. That healing was not an act of distance, but of presence. That to remain was to serve not glory, but growth. "I will not go," he said at last, and his voice was no louder than the wind. But it carried all the weight of his years, all the names he bore within him, all the stories etched into his hands. "Not because I love the ruin, but because I have seen what may rise from it." Calimion said nothing at first. Then he reached into the pouch at his side and pulled forth a seed, small, dark, unremarkable, and pressed it into Elenion's palm. "Then plant this," he said. "Let it grow, and teach the wind a new song." And so they began, not again, but anew. They walked not as soldiers, but as stewards, planting as they went, stone by stone, memory by memory, not seeking to rebuild what was lost, but to create what had never yet been. A world shaped not by wrath, but by wisdom, not by war, but by the quiet, defiant beauty of those who choose to stay, to nurture, to remember. And far above them the stars turned, not in judgment, but in blessing.